Do you know who the first woman to run for president was?
Oh,
let's see.
Susan B. Anthony. No.
Geraldine Ferraro. No?
No.
Nope. Okay, no. Sorry.
1872. Victoria Woodhull runs for President of the United States, breaking down barriers for women everywhere and spending election night in prison. Victoria Woodhull made history. So why don't we remember her story?
Victoria Woodhull spearheaded change for women in politics by advocating a progressive agenda, establishing her own political party, and accomplishing numerous firsts for women in the U.S. and all around the world. Her encounter in politics as one of the first women in a field dominated by men and exchange of revolutionary ideas with prominent men and political leaders through her writing and speaking empowered women to abandon both political and cultural gender roles and created a new political atmosphere. From the moment she was born on September 23, 1838, in Homer, Ohio, Woodhull faced unending obstacles. Being a woman in itself meant that Woodhull was extremely oppressed.
And the barriers were nonstop. We think we have barriers today, and we have barriers nothing like what those women had to deal with.
From her father's sexual abuse, she claims to have become a woman before my time, leading her into a downward spiral of promiscuity in a time that shunned women for expressing sexuality. Woodhull's childhood was dysfunctional. Her father was a fraudster and sacrificed his family's stability. She received almost no formal education. Woodhull grew close with her sister, Tennessee Claflin, who would prove to be a very important part of her life. And the two worked as mediums, a source of income for their otherwise impoverished family. They grew popular and became front-runners in the spiritualist movement, even becoming spiritual advisors to Cornelius Vanderbilt, the railroad magnate. Victoria Woodhull was, in short, a rebel. With the funds of Vanderbilt, Victoria and her sister, Tennessee, nicknamed Tenny, opened their own stock brokerage, becoming the first women to ever do so. On February 5, 1870, the girls opened their doors and encountered a shocked and intrigued public. In their first 7 weeks in business, they made $700,000. Today, that would be $13 million. With newfound wealth, the women continued spreading the revolution. Woodhull wanted to plant the flag of rebellion in the center of the continent. The notorious Victoria Woodhull and her sister soon after opened a newspaper named Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly and wrote about their radical ideas. They were constantly under scrutiny and were received by the public with uncertainty. Woodhull exchanged her radical ideas through her writing and public speaking. Victoria's powerful speeches gained her popularity as well as skeptics. Her speeches often expressed her belief in free love. In one speech on the principles of social freedom, "To love is a right higher than constitutions or laws." Today, 144 years later, this idea is still expressed and fought for in movements such as marriage equality. 50 years before women could vote and 100 years before her time, Woodhull expressing such views as a woman was revolutionary. Her speaking also led her to an even greater privilege and opportunity. Notorious Victoria became the first woman to address a congressional committee on January 11, 1871. After spending several months in Washington advocating for women's suffrage, the persuasive Woodhull convinced Benjamin Butler to allow her to speak her Woodhull Memorial to a congressional committee. She declared in this speech that the 14th and 15th Amendment gave women the right to vote. Woodhull made the bold choice to run for president in the 1872 election.
"I now announce myself as candidate for the presidency. I anticipate criticism, but however unfavorable, I trust that my sincerity will not be called into question."
A year after announcing her intention to run, Woodhull established her own political party, the Equal Rights Party. The party was based on progressive platforms, advocated and promoted ideas such as women's rights, sex education, spiritualism, workers' rights, rights and protection for children, free love, and vegetarianism. In short, the party's aim was to develop equal rights for all, and on this platform, Victoria Woodhull truly pushed the envelope, even by simply talking openly about sex, in a time when women didn't even have the right to vote and were viewed as property.
When the Pilgrims came over in 1620, when English common law came to this country, women were actually in a condition that's called civil death, meaning that they had no rights whatsoever at all. In fact, women were property. Most of that had not yet changed by 1872. So in 1872, when Victoria Woodhull established her own party and ran for president, that was groundbreaking.
Due to her extremely progressive and revolutionary ideas and her support of socialism, many were extremely alienated against Woodhull and her party.
Victoria Woodhull was easily 100 years before her time. Even radicals of the time, like Susan B. Anthony, distanced themselves from her because of her insistence on addressing sexual liberation ideas that were completely taboo at the time.
However, she did gain support from trade unionists, socialists, and less conservative women's suffragists, who still could not vote. These parties respected her passion for equal rights and enjoyed her radical charm. Victoria Woodhull's opponents, those who believed she was far too unladylike and were shocked that anyone would have the audacity to voice the ideas Woodhull was openly expressing, resorted to yellow journalism and slander, mainly misogynistic comments on Woodhull's personal life and relationships. Virginity, the word that would imprison Woodhull on election night in 1872 and drown her in further controversy. Victoria wrote the word virginity in a letter and was charged and tried under the Comstock law for sending obscene information through the mail. In result, Woodhull sat in Ludlow Street Jail on November 5, 1872, as Ulysses S. Grant was elected the 18th President of the United States. Woodhull and her newly established political party were barely taken seriously, and she clearly wasn't a big contender in the election. After all, she was a woman 50 years prior to women gaining the right to vote. Even today, many dispute whether her candidacy was legitimate. The indisputable fact is the effect Victoria Woodhull had. She proved, if nothing else, that women were not of inferior intellect, and her vast exchange of ideas created conversations on issues that are still discussed almost 150 years after Victoria Woodhull ran under her extremely progressive agenda. Wicked Woodhull and her sister moved to London in 1877, where they continued to passionately publicize women's rights, spearheading change for women in politics and accomplishing numerous firsts. By exchanging radical ideas with the skeptical public, Vicious Vicky motivated women to fight for basic rights and escape civil death. She was one of the first women to be encountered by men in politics and proved that women were not inferior to men. By proving such a dramatic point, Woodhull inspired equality and left the political field drastically different. Victoria Woodhull's legacy as the first woman to run for president and a pioneer for women's rights should live on and motivate equality.
And to understand what women have accomplished also allows us to value women. And our society and the world doesn't value women. And I believe that once we value women, all of society will be better.
Victoria Woodhull. Remember her story.